Render to Caesar what is Caesar's, and to God what is God's. This is a very well-known saying. In many cases, it is treated lightly, as if it simply means politics belongs to politics and faith belongs to faith. However, the actual setting in which these words were spoken was far from light. In that moment were intertwined the rule of the Roman Empire, the anger of Jewish society, the issue of taxation, national identity, and a carefully designed political trap intended to bring Jesus down. So what is the historical background of this statement, and what was Jesus truly trying to say? First, we must look at the background of the question. For the Jewish people, a census was not merely an administrative procedure, it was a matter handled with great caution before God. In Exodus 30, when a census was taken, each person was required to give half a shekel as a ransom for his life. This was called a ransom for life. What does this mean? Counting people was not about a state numbering its citizens. It was about accounting for lives that belonged to God. Therefore, within Jewish society, there was a deep awareness that a census was not something human authority could freely control. This tradition later became the basis for the temple tax. Every adult male gave half a shekel annually to the temple. It was not merely a financial act, but a declaration, I belong to God. Then the Roman Empire enters the scene. Rome did not view a census as a religious act. For Rome, a census was an administrative tool for governance. How many people there were, how much land existed, who lived where, these were recorded in order to impose taxes. In other words, for the Jews, a census was a matter before God, but for Rome, it was a matter of taxation and control. When Jesus was born, Joseph and Mary went from Nazareth to Bethlehem because of such a Roman census. From that moment, the order of the empire had already begun to penetrate deeply into Jewish life. A major shock came in AD 6. When Rome began to rule Judea directly, it conducted a new census. The purpose was clear: taxation. After counting the people, Rome intended to impose a poll tax. This caused a tremendous upheaval in Jewish society. Why? Because Rome was taking something considered to belong to God and turning it into a matter of imperial administration, and then demanding taxes for the emperor. At this time, Judas the Galilean appears. He strongly opposed Rome's census and tax policy and led a rebellion. His logic was clear: how can tribute be given to anyone but God? This event is even mentioned in Acts. Judas the Galilean rose up at the time of the census. Behind that brief statement lies the full tension between Roman rule and Jewish resistance. This movement later became the ideological foundation of the Zealots. Now we turn to the gospel scene. People come to Jesus and ask, is it right to pay taxes to Caesar? This is not a vague reference to taxes. The Greek word used is censos, derived from the Latin census. In Roman terms, this refers to tributum capitis, the poll tax. Why was this tax so sensitive? Because paying it was not merely about money, it carried a political meaning, acknowledging the authority of the Roman emperor. For Jewish nationalists, this was deeply troubling. But for those aligned with Rome, it was an accepted order. This tension is embedded in the question posed to Jesus. On Tuesday of Passion Week, Jesus was teaching in the temple in Jerusalem. At that moment, Pharisees and Herodians came together. This is a very unusual combination. The Pharisees were religious leaders centered on the law, often uneasy with Roman rule. They were critical of the poll tax. The Herodians, on the other hand, supported the political system of the Herodian dynasty and cooperated with Rome. Normally, these two groups would not act together, but now they had a common goal: to trap Jesus. Their question was this: is it right to pay taxes to Caesar? On the surface, it seems simple, but in reality, it was a carefully crafted political trap. If Jesus said, yes, pay it, the Pharisees and nationalist Jews would react, then he is on Rome's side. If he said, no, do not pay, the Herodians could accuse him immediately. He is inciting rebellion against Rome. In other words, no matter how he answered, he could be attacked. It was a very subtle trap. But Jesus does not fall into it. Instead of answering directly, he asks for a coin. They bring a Roman denarius. On the coin was the image of the emperor and an inscription referring to Tiberius as son of the divine Augustus. On the reverse side was the title Pontiff Maxim, High Priest. Think about it. This coin was not only political, it also carried a religious claim. The emperor was presented as a political leader, a military leader, and a religious authority. Jesus asks, whose image and inscription is this? They answer, Caesar's. Then comes his response: render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's. At first glance, it may seem like he simply avoided avoided the trap. But there is something far deeper here. Jesus' logic is clear. What bears Caesar's image belongs to Caesar, so give it back to him. He does not deny the existence of political authority. He acknowledges its limited role. But his statement does not end there. The more important part is the second sentence. And to God, the things that are God's. The Jewish audience would have immediately made the connection. Genesis 1. Human beings are created in the image of God. The coin bears Caesar's image, but human beings bear God's image. Therefore, Jesus' statement expands. What carries Caesar's image may be returned to Caesar, but the human person who bears God's image must be given to God. Now the issue goes beyond taxes. The question is no longer, should we pay taxes to the emperor? The question becomes, then to whom do you belong? Who holds ultimate authority over your life? This is the point where Jesus completely transforms the question. He elevates a political issue into a question of divine sovereignty. States, systems, and administrative orders function within human society, but no political authority can possess the whole of human existence, because human beings are created in the image of God. Therefore, the conclusion is clear. Political authority may be recognized, but it must never be absolutized. Caesar's domain exists, but it is limited. In contrast, what belongs to God encompasses the whole of human life. So Jesus' statement is not merely a clever answer to avoid a trap. It is a powerful declaration about where ultimate authority lies. What bears Caesar's image may be returned to Caesar, but human beings who bear God's image must be given to God. That is the true weight of the saying, render to Caesar what is Caesar's, and to God what is God's.